So the other day I was scrolling through YouTube doing what I often do, watching Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Whenever I'm at work and away from my scripts, I tend to watch a lot of videos on this website. It's something I've been doing since I was 10. YouTube's just been a huge part of my life for as long as I can remember. But ever since I got into Yu-Gi-Oh, I made it a point to keep a pulse on the meta since I can't really engage in meaningful discussion on the modern game without at least being somewhat informed. Anyways, I ended up stumbling on a video made by that other Yugioh guy called the OTK, How One Turn Killed Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a short discussion piece exploring the author's feelings about the current pace of Yu-Gi-Oh! And how OTKs have radically warped deck building philosophy. Or at least that's the message I took away from it. From what I recall, I didn't have a lot of thoughts regarding his arguments. He was kind of just pointing out power creep throughout the video, and he made this odd comparison where he tried to compare modern archetypes to gimmicky deck building in Magic the Gathering. However, this video did give me some ideas. I left a comment sharing my thoughts on the video, and in that comment, I explored the idea of an alternative format where traditional life points were replaced with a prize card sort of system, and how that system could be tied to the extra deck in order to regulate the pace and tempo of a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! The initial draft of that rule set in my comment was kind of ass, but I spent the next few days workshopping it, and well, I'm hoping what I came up with is at least a little fun. So in this video, we'll be going over the rules of this format I made, as well as I'll share some decks that I made for it. Yep, that's the intro. What, were you expecting a long-winded transition? I'm still on cooldown from my last video, give me a fucking break. The rule set I made is called Evermore Format, and the main idea is that it's a version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Which completely eliminates FTKs and OTKs from the game. Each player in a game of Evermore has to construct a 40 to 60 card main deck, along with a mandatory 20 card extra deck and an optional 15 card side deck. Before you begin a game in Evermore Format, you take at least 10 cards from your extra deck and set them aside face down. Those cards are your max health points during that game, and they can be anywhere from 10 to 20 cards in size. Each time you take damage during the damage step, instead of losing a number of life points, you'll instead deduct one card of your choice from your health points. That extra deck card must return face down to the top of your extra deck after it's deducted from your health points. The idea behind this is that as both players chip away at each other, they'll be adding new resources to their opponent's extra deck, which the opponent can use to swing the game back in their favor. It promotes a constant back and forth that emphasizes the sort of tug-of-war gameplay that modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is known for, and it only ends when a player reaches 0 health points. Now here's the real kicker. You still have a life point count in Evermore Format, but it isn't tied to your health. It's essentially just a resource pool that you use to pay the cost of certain card effects. So if your life points reach 0, don't worry. You won't lose the game, it just means that you won't be able to pay any life point costs. Each player starts with 8,000 life points like normal, and during each standby phase after turn 1, both players gain 2,000 life points. My reason for keeping life points in the game is because removing it would break a lot of decks. A lot of archetypes have cards with a life point cost, and decks like Dinomorphia completely hinge on the life point mechanic. It's just way too ingrained in the card design of this game, and I think finding new ways to use life points is more interesting from a design perspective than just scrapping it entirely. If you've been paying attention until now, you'll notice that the only way you can deal damage to an opponent is during the damage step. You literally can't FTK an opponent in Evermore Format, because having 0 life points doesn't result in a game loss. What this does mean though is that burn decks are able to tax resources and constrain what a deck is able to do. And to ensure that life points are a meaningful resource, I've placed a tax on extra deck summons. In Evermore Format, whenever you would summon a monster from your extra deck, you must pay 200 life points at that given time. The goal of this is to recontextualize burn decks since the health point mechanic completely shafts FTK archetypes. I didn't want to leave these players out to dry, so I figured this was an interesting way to breathe new life into a lot of burn strategies. I figure it's an interesting take on stun, and while I expect those decks to still be hated on, they should allow for more nuanced gameplay than they did before. Besides, you'll still gain 2,000 life points by the time it's your turn again. I'm sure that'll be enough to try and play through the burn decks board. And that's basically all the rule changes for this format. Like I said, this was something I made for shits and giggles. For the rest of this video, I want to show off 2 decks I constructed for this format before I give my final thoughts. I figured it would give people an idea of the sort of things you can do in Evermore, and it would give me an opportunity to yap about deck building theory. I haven't had a chance to playtest it myself, but if it ends up mirroring Cardfight Vanguard at all, I have a good idea of what the format may look like. The first deck I built is a 60 card Punk pile consisting of the Punk engine, the Gold Pride engine, the Shining Sarcophagus engine, and a small Dark Magicians package. I thought about including Dragoon, it's probably still a really strong going first card, but since the name of the game is flooding the board with bodies and trying to swing multiple times at the opponent, I figured that the Dark Magicians was a better Tamiya's target since it generates draws and could put another body on the board when destroyed. Granted, you're not going to see this line every game, but I figured it gave the Shining Sark package something to do going first, and it's also just a draw engine. The intended end board during the early game is generally any combo of Baller, Duration, Jam Fever, Rising Scale, the Dark Magicians, Kashtira Fenrir, and either of the 2 trap cards. Turn Silence is also good to get to if possible, but it's kind of niche going first since you have to be sitting on both Shining Sarcophagus and a monster that mentions it. Like, it's still a searchable called by, and it's good to have in the deck, but I would prioritize other plays first. A lot of the extra deck monsters outside of the starting extra deck list are mostly duplicates for grind games, as well as removal and high impact blowout cards. I just don't see a point in including those in your starting extra deck. The way I see it, saving them for later will prevent them from getting immediately sniped by a deck like Cool Tune. My reason for building Punk first was because it's an all-in combo deck that can put out a ton of bodies and keep a pretty strong board presence. And it can still do that without summoning a ton of extra deck monsters. The extra deck in Punk lists are often very toolboxy, so I figured it would do well in this sort of format. Plus, it's just a deck that I'm comfortable playing. The other deck I want to show off is a mostly pure Evil Twins deck. It does have a small Labyrinth package, but I only really included that because I wanted to run a bunch of trap cards. When I started getting into Yu-Gi-Oh!, Twins were the first modern archetype that I gravitated towards. I found the idea of sacrificing VTubers to be really funny back in 2021, but over the years I've kind of developed an unironic love for this archetype. It has a really simple gameplay loop, and it mostly relies on non-engine in its pure form. Normally in this deck you would run a bunch of hand traps and play a small Fiendsmith package, but since the goal of this was to try and emulate my first Twins deck, I decided to forego all of that and just throw in a bunch of traps. There's a ton of really good cards in here, and a lot of them aren't once per turn, so you're able to sit back and kind of just camp during the early game. I tried to make sure there wasn't too many starters clogging my opening hands, and ideally you want to make sure there's at least 2 traps in your starting hand in case you open any of your Labyrinth cards. I'm not sure how much back row hate will be present in this format, but I could possibly see people including Lightning Storm at the very least, so I'd probably be mindful of that if you're playing a lot of back row cards. Something I really wanted to demonstrate is how certain decks can run less than 10 cards in their starting extra deck. A pure Evil Twins deck mostly cares about getting to Trouble Sunny and Albao turn 1, so that's all I really included in here along with a copy of Typhon. Because of that, this deck is able to start the game with 14 health points instead of 10, meaning that it can survive 2 entire turns even if nothing's on the board and you're being hit by 5 monsters each turn. Another thing I observed while theory crafting these decks is that with FTKs and OTKs basically absent from the format, it allows for more experimentation during deck building. A lot of this stems from the fact that your deck no longer needs to be able to win the game on the spot and engage in a million different micro actions turn 1. Decks have a lot more room to breathe now due to this rule set, and while you can still include a ton of hand traps to build an early game lead, I don't think it's a complete auto win like the way it feels in the advanced format. You should have a lot more room to include trap cards and board breakers, along with resource cards that can be used in grind game situations. Tempo swings are something that the format is designed around, so it's better to embrace that and either play into it or deny your opponent the same thing. So that's more or less the decks I made. Hopefully I was able to convey a lot of my theory behind deck building, along with my intent for the format. I don't necessarily have an adjusted Forbidden and Limited list prepared for this format, but if you want any suggestions, I can provide some pointers. For starters, I would keep an eye on oppressive burn cards like Masquerade the Blazing Dragon. If a burn deck is able to completely tax your life points on turn 1 and end on a board with a lot of interruption along with a strong burn card like this, it could cause a ton of gridlock. I would also ban a ton of oppressive floodgates. We really don't need that on top of life point taxing. It would just get too obnoxious. I would list all of them here in this video, but it would take me a good 2 to 3 minutes to go through the entire list. Their names are in the description. You're definitely going to want to hit Runic pretty hard. It will quickly mill the opponent to death if you don't limit every spell in that archetype. You'll also want to keep a close eye on the jar flip monsters. They could cause some issues. Mermail was a deck that I had to keep a considerable eye on when I was working on my other alternative format, and it's probably going to cause a fair bit of issues in this one too, considering games last a lot longer. I would personally ban Abyss Lead and Mulling Glacia. Speaking of games lasting longer, I would probably go ahead and ban One Day of Peace, since it fucks with the pace of the format. I would also keep an eye on Threatening Roar and Battle Fader. You should definitely limit them if it becomes a problem. Finally, you need to hit Tenpai in some capacity. Whether it's Sangan summoning or Trident Dragion, you need to ban something meaningful. Any effects or combos that allow a card to attack multiple times per turn in this format are going to be pretty high value if they can go off. And Tenpai is known for getting off a ton of swings in a single battle phase. It's probably the only deck in this format off the top of my head that can still OTK if the stars align. So that should be everything. I had a lot of fun messing around with the rules of the game while retaining what makes modern Yu-Gi-Oh great, and I hope you all can have fun with what I made. If you enjoyed the video, leaving a like and comment goes a long way. I don't really expect this format to blow up, it sort of just came to me in the span of a few days, but if you all had any fun trying it out, I would love to hear your stories in the comments. Also, do not ask me to come on your video and discuss this format. I have a horrible stutter, and the only reason you don't hear it is because I chop the fuck out of my recordings. So if you have any questions, I'll make a community post and link that in the pinned comment. Anyways, that's about it for me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.